Where's the TV? Good evening. It's 6:15 on the 17th of January 2017, and we're here for our regularly scheduled Brattleboro Selectboard meeting. We convened the meeting at 5:45 and went into executive session to discuss contracts, labor agreements, and evaluations, where general premature public knowledge would clearly place municipality, others involved, and the select board at a substantial disadvantage. We have risen from that executive session without making any decisions there. Greetings to everybody who's in attendance at tonight's meeting. Greetings to everybody who's watching us on BCTV, whether live or recorded. I want to welcome our ASL interpreters, members of the press, and our BCTV operators. The first item on tonight's public meeting agenda is to approve the minutes from January 3.
So
we have a
moved.
motion. We have a motion to approve the minutes from January 3 as presented. Anybody have any comments or suggestions about those minutes, either from the board or somebody who's in attendance? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from January 3 as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. The next item on the agenda is chair's remarks, and I don't think I have any chair's remarks tonight. Town manager's comments is next.
I do have one. Just a quick update on the request that you approved. You'll recall about 6, maybe as long as 8 weeks ago, we had the presentation of the Route 30 corridor plan. And the only action coming out of that evening was to request that VTrans take a look at the speed limit in that corridor out as far as the West River Park, and then out to the area of the Saxons River Distillery and the Fire Arts Center, to see if they would maintain that at 40 miles an hour when the construction of the I-91 bridge is finished. You approved that we make that request. I did make that request, and I've received a response from the state where they indicated that they will conduct a study there. I was advised that in 2003 the town made a similar request, and there was an engineering study at the time, and it did not support lowering the speed limit at that time from 50 to 40. However, the state agrees that given the passage of time, and especially given the change in the circumstance where there's now been an extended period of time at 40 miles an hour during the construction of the I-91 bridge, that it's appropriate to conduct an engineering study while it's still a 40 mile an hour zone. And see if that tells us anything different than the 2003 study did. So they will complete that. They will let us know when it is finished, and we will have a few weeks' notice of a meeting of the State Vermont Traffic Committee, made up of the Secretary of Transportation, Commissioner of Motor Vehicles, and Commissioner of Public Safety. They are the ones who will make the decision about this, and we'll have an opportunity to be involved in that meeting, and we'll get advance notice of that meeting when the engineering work is done.
Thank you, Peter.
Sure.
Next item on the agenda is select board comments and committee reports. Anybody have comments or committee report? John?
Let's see, we had another spirited meeting up at the district, the solid waste district. Couple of things that went through. They did finally agree on, Bob went through all the figures on closing the MRF, and it was right around $94,000. They did agree upon that. And I think everybody read in the paper, the $50 tipping fee was voted on.
For
The tipping fee for the composting, yep. And there's still going to be another $15 charge, which is still brings us up to the $65 total for Triple T to truck it up to there. But we didn't gain anything, we didn't lose anything, but we are keeping the composting in town. And if Peter or Patrick have anything to add to that on, if you've had any discussions with Bob Spencer or anything, I'm just going through what was said at the meeting, so if there's any other light that you want us?
The only thing I would add is that these would be the expected terms, and just as the situation with the decision you made previously about Casella and the trucking of the recycling materials to Rutland, the expected terms are all subject to getting the final details right in an agreement and bringing that agreement back to you for a formal approval. So in the next several weeks, we expect to wrap up both of those matters and bring those agreements to you for final approval.
Thank you. Anybody else on the board? Dick?
Actually, I have a question for the administration. Several people have been asking me about the flashing light at Main and Elliott, and they are actually, I mean, they're really outraged, especially pedestrians that feel like they're putting their lives at risk crossing the street, that people don't stop when they're in the crosswalk. Wouldn't mind if the police were down there and started pulling people over for not adhering to the law that says pedestrians have the right of way, and also your thoughts on maybe getting some crosswalk stanchions in the middle of the road down there to just make sure until that light gets fixed. It is a problem, and a lot of people are complaining about it.
Right. It is. We're right on the eve of it actually being fixed this time, and we've learned from this most recent event that the importance of keeping some extra parts around so that we can do a quicker repair. We had to wait an extra long period of time, longer than expected, for the necessary parts to come in to be able to put that light back into proper cycle service this time. But we do expect that to happen probably before the end of this week, definitely next week if it doesn't happen this week. I'll talk with staff about whether in future occasions when this happens, because those poles are in vulnerable positions. This isn't going to be the last time that an accident happens that knocks it out. If we have one like this that is extended for several weeks again, perhaps we should take some of those measures that you described.
What happened that caused the lights to be on flash?
There was an accident where a vehicle hit the pole and knocked the system out of service. I don't know all the details of exactly how those lights are controlled, but the technology that controls the cycle process was damaged in the accident, and it has taken us a while to get the parts to repair.
Actually took the tree out. That was
I saw
just
it took the tree out.
Took the tree out and actually hit Brattleboro. The car hit Brattleboro.
Yeah.
Somebody had a heart attack and went through the light and hit the car coming up the hill.
I hope they're okay.
Everybody's okay.
Well, there was a lot of discussion, I think, before you were elected back onto the board about people wanting to put the lights onto flash rather than on cycle, and we resisted that request, and clearly people need to have the opportunity to ask for a walk signal with traffic that doesn't stop flowing. Anybody else on the board?
Couple
Dave?
things. Just about the upcoming town meeting and election. They already, I think we may have as many as 5 resolutions on the ballot. There are petitions out. 2 of them have been, have enough, the banning single-use plastic bags and changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day, have enough signatures that they will be on, well, at least it'll come to us and we'll see it on the warning. And if people are interested in running for town board, town select board, or school board, or town meeting rep, you have to get the petitions in by 5 p.m. on the 30th, which is a little less than 2 weeks from now. And the town meeting is March 7th, when you'll be doing the voting. I just want to continually remind people of that.
I have nothing exciting.
Next item on the agenda is public participation. This is a good time for anybody who's in attendance at the meeting who wants to speak to something that's not on the agenda. Anybody want to speak during public participation? Next item on the agenda is liquor commissioners. We're ready for motion to convene as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
We have a motion to convene as liquor commissioners. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. The item on tonight's liquor commissioners agenda is a request for a first-class liquor license and outside consumption permit for Casa Diaz LLC. What's it over at the
Quality.
Quality Inn?
Inn.
Yep.
All right then. So we have somebody here on behalf of the owners, and you can either come to the table or you can come to the mic, whichever you prefer.
Okay, thank you.
Tell us your name, please.
My name is Rick Contino, and I represent Jose Diaz and Casa Diaz. And first off, Jose wants to extend his gratitude for allowing me to appear on his behalf. His wife is due at any point now, so it's a huge favor to him to allow me to come and represent him here.
Generally, what happens during these liquor license applications is that the owner or representative gets to come in and tell us a little bit about the business. It's a little bit of free publicity if you want to do that.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, Peter will, or even if you do or don't, Peter will then just give a little bit about the town review of the application
Okay.
and tell us if there's any issues.
I'll do a little plug.
Sure.
So the restaurant will hopefully be opening mid-February. It'll be an authentic Mexican restaurant featuring the cooking work of Jose's mother, Anastasia Diaz, who grew up in Guerrero, Mexico, and will be offering her authentic recipes there. The restaurant will also hopefully feature a full Mexican bar featuring sangrias and Mexican drinks. And also Jose's wife has managed bars in the Los Angeles area for a long time. Jose is bringing his 10 years of restaurant and bar managing experience in the Los Angeles area to the table as well. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope it's going to be a great restaurant for Brattleboro. So come on out in mid-February.
Thank you. Peter, if you want to talk about the application process,
Sure, so
approval process.
you have in the notebooks a memorandum dated January 10th from Town Clerk Hillary Francis, where she has outlined the particulars of this, consistent with what was just presented, and also identifies in there that this has been reviewed and approved by both the police and fire departments. So we recommend that you approve it. As with any other liquor license matter, when you have approved it, it's still subject to state approval before it becomes final.
Anybody on the board have any questions or comments?
I didn't see, were they looking for an outside consumption?
That's a good
Yes.
point. Thank you. May I address that?
Please.
Yeah, they are, and that was circulated today, actually. That was not in the original materials. That's a good catch. They have identified the 10-foot by 35-foot sidewalk area between the restaurant and the parking lot along the entire length of the dining area, sectioned off with a 3-foot-high mobile fencing, both plastic and metal, as being where they would like seasonally to offer the outside dining.
Well, that was part of our
That,
first page.
It was not in the original application as it was submitted in the notebooks, but you did receive that, an indication of that today.
Okay, I saw addendum and outside consumption permit application, so.
Yeah. Yes, the fact that they were seeking the outside
Oh.
consumption permit it was part of the original.
Okay.
The details of exactly where that would be laid out was not, and that's a requirement of the permit, which is why we received it today.
Any other questions or comments from anybody on the board? Is there anybody in attendance who's got any questions or comments about this application? We're ready, please, for a motion.
To approve the first-class liquor license and outside consumption permit for Casa Diaz LLC, DBA Casa Diaz, located at 1380 Putney Road.
We have a motion to approve the liquor license for Casa Diaz. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Good luck. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Rick.
Is there any other business to come in front of us as liquor commissioners? Ready for motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda is under unfinished business, the FY18 budget. Peter?
Thank you. I think we can see the finish line from here. Based on work that you have done, we have assisted with, and the public has participated in during 9 separate select board meetings over the last couple of months. You now have a modified proposed FY18 budget in front of you. The changes from what staff originally prepared and submitted to you back on November 1st have been explicitly identified in my memorandum to you dated January 12th. That's a part of the notebook. The net decrease in property taxes that it represents is the changes represent is $231,148. And so the property tax rate increase that this budget would represent would be at 3.5 cents instead of 5.5 cents. You've cut 2 pennies off of that rate in the course of the work that we've done together on this. The overall total revenues and total expenses have actually increased from the original proposed budget, and that's because of the additional commitment to capital and the additional use of fund balance as a revenue. So the revenues that are sort of outside of the town's control have remained unchanged. You've made minor modification to the transfer from the parking fund and the transfer, a more significant one, and the transfer to the capital fund. And you've reduced the proposed tax rate by 2 cents, or $230,000. I believe that unless there's any additional issues that have arisen that any of you are concerned about, that the budget is now ready for you to approve and send on to town meeting for consideration.
Is there anybody on the board who's got any questions or comments on the budget as presented? Mr. DeGray.
I'm going to throw myself at the mercy of my fellow board members who voted against my proposal for the Creamery Bridge and ask one of you for a motion to reconsider and change your vote to the affirmative. I've had several people speak to me after last week's meeting, and they thought that that was a no-brainer and a real asset to the community. So I'm asking if one of you, if not all three of you, someone would make a motion to reconsider and change your vote.
Do I hear such a motion?
Well, out of due respect for you, Mr. DeGray, I will make the motion. However you want to state it.
Well, it's a motion to reconsider the
Reconsider the
$8,000
$8,000.
for the Creamery Bridge. And I think it would go a long way to providing a real valuable asset to be used by locals and tourists who find that that's a rental space. And there were several business people that actually talked to me about it, florists and other people who said, who actually have been pursuing me in this endeavor.
Any further discussion or comment by anybody on the board?
So just clarification on the motion. The motion is to reconsider the Select Board's previous decision regarding the Creamery Bridge. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We're just reconsidering it, we're not voting.
So we're not voting on, we're just voting to reconsider first.
If that's what your motion is for.
Well, I think that's the
Put
first.
that back on the table.
I think that's the first motion that we have to do, and then we have to vote on it.
That's fine. Is there any further discussion from anybody who's in attendance at this meeting? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion to reconsider the board's decision last week about funding to make improvements to the Creamery Bridge, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
Okay.
That carries 3-2. All right, so we decided to reconsider that decision. Is it the board's pleasure to address that on the merits this evening and then have another vote?
I think we should just have another vote.
I do. I
Yeah.
think that that's what this is about. You have to get somebody who votes in the majority to make the motion. David or I couldn't because we were the minority. So I appreciate John doing that. And I hope that John supports this, and I hope that David and Kate do support this.
Any further discussion or comment?
I just want to make a comment. I've actually had people that came to me and said, thanks for not letting the Creamery Bridge be used, because they see it as a, it's a historic thing. People like to go look at it, but what if you had an event there? Could people go look at it? So, I think there are people, it's one of these issues, I think some people think it's a good idea, some people necessarily don't. So for that reason, I'm not going to change my mind. I'm in the camp that I don't think it's an event space, but I get what you're saying, Dick, because I think it can cut both ways.
So Dick, just to point out where I am, I was in favor of bringing this back up, just being respectful for you. But I probably will vote the same way, because I've had some people come up to me and say it's just nice the way it is. But again, I can see where it could go either way. Yeah.
Any further discussion from anybody on the board? Anybody who's in attendance? We have a motion. Do we have a motion?
No.
No.
I guess we need a motion.
Motion to reconsider.
No, now the
No, now
motion
we're
is
on the
to,
motion.
The motion is to put $8,000 back into the budget for the Creamery Bridge upfit.
we have a motion to put $8,000 into the budget to pay for Creamery Bridge upfit. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye?
All those opposed? Nay. That's defeated. 2-3.
Thank you.
1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
2, yes, okay.
2 on
And
that
who
side,
made the
3 on this
motion?
side.
Well,
I did.
yes, Dick did.
Dick did.
I made the motion.
Yep.
And it was defeated
2-3.
2, 3.
Is there any further discussion about the FY18 budget? Or anybody on the board? Anybody who's in attendance?
I don't think anybody on the board is going to have a question. So
I move to approve the FY18 budget as presented at this meeting and to recommend that representative town meeting adopt the budget on March 25. And we'll approve the specific wording of the article at the
January 31st.
January 31st meeting. Any further discussion? On the motion to approve the budget as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda is the FY16 it's a financial, no,
Nope.
it's, I'm sorry. The next item is police fire project. Steve's there, right? Yeah. Police fire project.
Police fire, yeah, you're right.
Peter?
So the update at West Brattleboro is we're getting so close now that there's very little activity outdoors. Almost all the work is going on inside, and during the next 2 weeks, we expect to be all but complete with painting of walls and ceilings, installation of millwork, interior doors and plumbing, and completion of the mechanical room installation and the related systems. Efficiency Vermont will be coming back before the end of the month to conduct the blower door test as soon as the building has been sealed up sufficiently to make that a worthwhile endeavor. And the next meeting of the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee is actually going to be held at the West Brattleboro Fire Station on February 1st. At their last meeting, we talked about having a tour there, and they asked, well, do you think it'll be far enough along we could actually hold a meeting there? And we thought that was a great idea, and so that's what we'll be doing. Central Station, the activity there is very much as you've been seeing it for the last several weeks, although today there was some additional activity to remove the overhang that's at the southeast corner of the building. That's necessary in order to make that a smooth facade so that when the steel arrives in the next couple of weeks, they'll be able to actually install the steel frame that is going to support the portion of the addition that's going to be in that part of the building. So we do still expect steel before the end of January, so we expect by early February you're going to see a lot of additional activity at the site. But right now it's still pouring of foundations and the removal of that overhang. And at the police station, good progress has been made in the first couple of weeks of the work. They began 2 weeks ago today there. The work is ongoing in what will be the tenant space to make that ready for the reformer to move in. We expect that to happen the end of February or the beginning of March, and then the rest of the project will proceed to create the police station.
Anybody have any questions, either on the board or anybody who's in attendance, about the progress of construction on any three of those parts of this project? Guess not. Next.
The next part of the report is on the expenses that I've authorized. There are just four. One that's a little bit larger, but consistent with the prior payments to the Richards Group for builder's risk insurance. We had talked about that earlier in the job, and then as each new element went under construction, we received the bill to pay. So that's $13,092 for the police station builder's risk insurance. There's also a couple of small payments, one of $159.92 and one of $39.98 to WB Mason for bathroom dispensers at the two fire stations, and a payment to Suburban Propane of $1,532.87 to fill the propane tank at the West Brattleboro Fire Station. Those are the new items that are on that list of owner expenses authorized by the town manager. And then we do have a request before you this evening for your authorization for the team to expend $65,239.80 on a variety of outfitting expenses. Some of it is equipment that is movable equipment that's going to be part of actually furnishing the station, and part of it is fixed equipment and part of the facility. So I can list those individually, or if you want, we can just take them as a group. Can we list them?
Yeah, just.
Sure. So as set forth in the memorandum that I provided you, that's in the notebook on this topic, there's $21,000 for a station alerting system. That's the system that allows dispatch to communicate both through tones and voice to advise the firefighters when there is a call that needs to be responded to. There's $13,791.80 for the residential area furnishings. I want to make the point there that I think the chief and the assistant chief were really restrained in the requests that they've made. So there's some of the existing furnishings that are just used up. And so those will be replaced by this purchase, but there's equally some that is in good shape still. We transported over into the new station. And so this $14,000 expense, would have been substantially higher if they had just said, well, let's replace everything that we need, buy new for everything that we need. So that was good. And we also, in the competitive bidding, got very good prices for these items. So the next is two identical expenses, $6,875 each, for a gear extractor, one for West Brattleboro Fire Station, one for the Central Fire Station. Gear extractor is a term that is specific to this very large, very heavy-duty piece of equipment that otherwise would look to us like a washing machine. But it washes the very heavy gear of the firefighters, and it's a substantial machine that actually gets installed, fixed to a base, a pad that's poured for that purpose to keep it stable. And so that's why the cost is so much higher than what we would be used to for household use. There's a radio tower that's being installed on the exterior of the building on the back side of the West Brattleboro Fire Station to hold all of the communications equipment for that facility. The turnout lockers for the West Brattleboro Fire Station, the radio tower installation is $6,415. The turnout lockers, $5,600. And lastly, a generator transfer switch for West Brattleboro. We've talked in prior meetings about the generators and how they were the top priority, we believe, for the expense from contingency in terms of making sure that the buildings are properly outfitted from the start. This transfer switch needs to be paid from contingency for West Brattleboro to make it ready to connect to the generator at that location. The comparable transfer switch is actually included in the guaranteed maximum price at each of the other two facilities, because once we got that far along in this process, we realized that the transfer switch was a gotta have, and the generators were the very highest priority wanna have. So the total of the station alerting, residential furnishings, gear extractors, radio tower, turnout lockers, and generator transfer switch before you tonight is $65,239.80, and we request your approval.
Any questions from anybody on the board?
Go ahead, David.
Dave?
John, help me remember. At some point in the distant past, when we were looking at these budgets in the committee, and we talked about taking the furniture out. And I remember Steve making an argument about there's some stuff it's crazy to take out, you want to build it in, and there's all, all these other reasons, but chairs, tables, beds, stuff like that, you can get those somewhere else. And I'm not sure, I haven't been involved in it this year, so I don't know if we just said, no, we'll get them out of contingency, so now they're gonna come out of the contingency fund, or whether if this is really the appropriate use, given that the furniture was taken out of the bid, out of the initial proposals that are being paid for by the bond. And it's I don't know if the turnout lockers are like that or not, but it's almost 20,000.
Before Peter answers, I have a similar question, so I want to articulate it, and I want to make sure that anybody else who's got a similar question is asking that, so it can be answered at once. So I have a very similar question, which is that, to me, it looks like essentially all these items are gotta-have items. You need the machines to wash the gear. You need the system alerts so that the firefighters know when to go to a call.
Exactly.
All of these, the radio tower appears to be necessary items. So it looks to me like part of the planning to get us down to the lowest possible price involves stripping out some items that really were going to be needed for the core functioning of the police and the fire when they were departments when they were at these locations. And now we're using the contingency, since it appears, at least at this time, that it's not going to be expended for other things, to do that necessary upfit. So is that what's going on? And then we should just make sure if there are similar questions before that's answered.
Well, the only one that I could see here that probably belongs, and it shouldn't have been here, is the transfer switch for the generator, because I believe that all of the facilities should have backup generators because they are emergency facilities. But I strongly agree with David that none of these items should be here. They should have been in the original document, and then to take them out and then to bring them back and take the contingency, I'm not going to vote for this. And I'm really disappointed that this is the way that we got to the number, by taking stuff out that was essential for the fire department and the police department, in this case, the fire department, and now we put it back in, is not a good way to do business.
Well, just the only thing that I can remember from the meetings, and there was a lot of them, and they were a long time ago, and we've had many meetings on this. The only item that I can see that really was up in the air a lot was the furnishings. That seemed to be the big bone of contention on, whether we needed it, how much we could use of the old stuff. As far as, I'm a little bit not shocked, but on some of these things that are now on this list. So
what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that these all appear to be necessary items, so I'm going to vote in favor. But Peter, if you could speak, and if anybody else could speak about the process that got us to this point where these seemingly gotta-have items are now being
Sure.
to be purchased out of the contingency.
Can I just ask a question that you can answer? My big question is, are there others like this that are gonna pop up?
Absolutely.
And maybe you can answer that when
Sure.
you're answering.
So, let me first say that in the representation of the overall total cost of the project, as it was presented to town meeting, to you first, and then on to town meeting, we knew, and I believe we discussed, that there would be costs that would go beyond the basic construction costs, that there would be the contractor's guaranteed maximum price, and then there would be additional expenses of various types. The largest and most obvious of that is the expenses for the design team that oversees the work, but we knew there would be other costs like these as well. There are a greater number of these because of the process we went through to squeeze the estimated price as low as we could possibly get it. So there are some of these things where if we had absolutely had to, if the GMP, for instance, had come in higher than what we've been able to approve and move along with in the course of this construction, some of these things we would have had to live without, and we would have had to either move equipment that really is old enough that it ought to be replaced, and just get by with it for a few more years until we could afford to just buy it separately, or in some cases just live without it entirely. What we have talked about very explicitly, because I can remember a conversation towards the end of the summer when you were approving one of the GMPs, where we were talking about generators. And you had a very great concern, and I'm not suggesting that was wrong, but as a board, you had a very great concern that the generators were not included in the GMPs for the 3 projects. And so we talked explicitly about the fact that there would be costs like this that would be coming back from time to time as we got deep enough into the job to know that there was sufficient contingency to be able to handle a particular item, and that it was right to buy it rather than to move an obsolete piece of furniture over or a piece of equipment over, or live without something that they really ought to have. And so we're being really cautious with this. There's still a lot of work left to go, but we believe that $65,000 out of an existing contingency that's almost $850,000 is an appropriate use for these essential items. It leaves $781,450 left in contingency, which is over 6% of the total project budget. So we think we're being careful and cautious in the use of this, but yes, you should expect to see more. One very explicitly that would still be coming along is there's not really offices at West Brattleboro. There is a little bit of office equipment that for their basically like the watch office there. And the furniture that's in the existing station is in good shape, and so it's going to come over into the West Brattleboro station and the new station, and so there isn't going to be office furnishings there. But for the administrative offices, where we've got some very old, completely used furnishings, we will be back to make a request for funding of office furnishings for the administrative offices at Central when we get to that part of the job. But there'll be generators. We'll be coming along asking for 3 generators later on at the appropriate times when we get to that part of each of the 3 projects. And there'll be some other things like this when we get to the police station project. This is about all there's going to need to be for fire. I can't guarantee that there won't be something more other than the furnishings I mentioned. But for police, there certainly will be some similar items to equip the station with the bond funds.
Is it standard procedure to use contingency funds in this way?
Yes.
It is.
Well,
As things come up.
or to have.
It's not at the end. We're hoping that we're not going to have to.
Yeah, or to have allocated them in the first instance, so that the budget actually identified an expected amount for furnishings and an expected amount for some of the other equipment. But it's and I should say on the furnishings that that amount for the West Brattleboro Fire Station was $12,000. What you have before you tonight is $13,791 for both stations, the residential furnishings for both stations. So, again, these are, there's nothing on here that represents a cost that is alarming to us in magnitude. It's all about what we would have expected it to be. Some of it actually had placeholder allocations identified within the project budget that we went through together in the preparation for the decisions that you made around this. But the funds reside in the project contingency, because the project contingency is where the unspent monies that are available to finish the job.
Right, but in some ways though, we don't know. I mean, we could hit a big boulder, or, we could hit something that, and we're spending down a contingency that. Do you see? I mean, we're spending contingency money before we know that the project's actually completed, and we don't have a big, sinkhole.
You should hear from Steve Horton about the level of confidence that we have. We actually purposely didn't come to you sooner to ask for any of this because of exactly that concern. But we are, finished with any of those kinds of issues at West Brattleboro. We're all but finished with any of those kinds of issues at Central, and we don't have a lot of underground work. We do have some out in the parking lot area, but we don't have any building-related underground work to do at the police station. And so the degree to which there would be that magnitude of a surprise is limited. But let me ask Steve to put some meat on those bones.
Sure. First off, to Dick's point, this was a risk management strategy and not a deception strategy. The 3 locations each have a line item for furniture, and West B has a $12,000 budget for furnishings. Tonight, we're asking for $13,780, but it's for both West B and Central Furnishings. So we knew or budgeted $12,000 for beds, chairs, nightstands for West B. So this is not a, where did this come from, why didn't we think of this? But on the other hand, radio tower, at the time the bond vote was passed, we anticipated being able to use the old one. Now we know, 2 years later, that radio tower is obsolete, and with the money that we have saved in the project, we're recommending that radio tower be replaced and put on the building new. Those are the 2 types of conditions that we're bringing to you tonight, but initially it was a risk management process in that if we hit the boulder, or if we hit the ledge, or if we had an unknown condition, like subcontract bids went up 10% in a year, that we would still be able to meet our initial charge from the voters, which was build the most cost-effective buildings that you could. And now what we're suggesting is we are accomplishing that for less than the budget allocated, and we're recommending these upgrades be made to improve those facilities that much more.
Can I,
Okay.
I just want to ask a clarifying question, just so I understand it. The budget for the fire stations included 12,000 for furnishings?
West B did.
Okay.
And for instance, Central Station has either 80 or 100,000 just for furnishings.
So why are we approving this?
Because it's over the $10,000 limit
Right.
that we're allowed to spend without your
Right, but if it was
permission.
already in the budget that we approved, why are we?
Because it's over $10,000.
Well, that's what I'm at, okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right, so you asked explicitly when we set up that process for how we're gonna spend money that isn't in the construction
Right, but I just
project.
thought Steve said it was in the budget. But it
In the
was
budget, not in the GMP.
Okay,
For a
okay.
good reason, because everything that's in the GMP also gets a markup for the oversight of the contractor. So they need to do that for us in all the different construction trades. But things like you are going to see some more of these kinds of expenses, in part because we don't want to pay an administrative cost to the contractor for something we can do for ourselves. So we just buy the equipment directly and put it in.
So, Peter, could you explain, what did we have initially for our contingency for all 3? We had,
It was
Ru-
10%.
so it was, okay. So, no.
Sorry, I don't have that
Yeah.
budget. I can go to my office
No,
and get the
it's
original
fine.
budget. I don't have
No,
that.
because my question is, and for the people in the audience or whoever, if there were no contingencies used and we didn't touch a nickel of that contingency, where would that contingency money go back to?
It could be reallocated by an action of town meeting to some other capital purpose.
Right. Okay.
You can't use it to pay off the debt.
No, you can't
That's
use it to
correct.
pay
You
off-
cannot
right.
use it
You
to pay
cannot
off the
use
debt.
it to pay off the debt.
And you can't use it for any other project except by an action of town meeting.
Right. Right.
So, pardon me, Steve, but, this is like the old hidden ball trick to me. And, I've used that term a couple of months ago with my flashing yellow lights, is that we took out all of these things. And I've seen a lot of lists since I've been here, but I didn't see a list of things that were removed to get us under a certain number, knowing all well that these would be coming back and we would use the contingency, because that's how I feel about it, is that, okay, we'll take these out, and then as the project goes along, we'll come back and we'll put these back in.
No.
I mean, maybe I can buy your explanation about the West Brattleboro alarm, but all of these things, like the furniture, how did you, it's there. Now, you said there was 12,000, and I would agree with Kate. Why am I voting for something that should have been, now you took it out for the
No, it's been in the
GMP
budget.
price?
It went in front of the voters. $12,000 line item in the bond vote for furniture at West B.
Right.
We're not allowed to spend any more than $10,000 without your approval on one single thing. We're asking you to spend that $12,000.
So why aren't you just asking me for approval to spend $3,791?
I can address that if that's right.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, the budget, just like our town budget, you're all very familiar with the town budgeting process. You know, we spent weeks developing a plan, and then it gets approved at town meeting, and then come next July 1st, we start implementing it. And just because you approved something in the budget doesn't mean that we can go do it if it costs more than $10,000. We can use staff authority up to $10,000 to get done things that have been approved. But if it's over $10,000, we have to come back to you. At the beginning of this project, because of the magnitude of what we were dealing with and because we knew that there would be occasions when there would be something urgent and that it would be in the best interest of the job and the town for me to be able to approve something in excess of 10, you granted me specific authority to do that when there was a sense of urgency about it and report back to you about what I did. And we set up that system where you get the report like I gave earlier tonight about all the minor things that I've approved that are under 10, plus anything that's over 10 and why it was a sense of urgency around it, right? So what you have in front of you tonight is a collection of items, some of which individually are over $10,000, but which represent together a use of the contingency of $65,000. And frankly, we could have technically complied with the policy and bought 5 out of the 7 items because they're less than $10,000. But I think that would have been too cute by half. We knew that these things were coming along at this point in the process, requiring a use of contingency. And even though I would have disclosed those on my list, you know, I think they're actually more appropriately clustered as our first use of this type. And I would respectfully say again, remind you that we have had this kind of a conversation before. I understand the concern you have that maybe the project could have been approached differently. And maybe you would have put, individually, you might have made a decision to put more into the GMP or approached the listing of these items somehow differently. But collectively, we had conversations about this, about the fact that there were things that are considered essential and where it would be best to meet those essential needs with new equipment rather than reused equipment. But in order to make sure that we had enough money to get all the way through the job, we would be coming back to you at different times and as we get near the end of these different phases to request that you make authorizations of exactly this type for these kinds of purposes, rather than having built all of that into a GMP where there would have been markup on it as well. It wouldn't have required a use of contingency, but the original GMP number would have been higher, not only by this magnitude, but by the additional administrative overhead for the contractor.
But I'm gonna recognize myself and then recognize other people whose hands are up. I think it was important for us to walk through the process that got us here. I think there are some questions about what items were and were not previously allocated. And it was important to have the refresher and the explanation. My view at this point is that, at least from what I've heard, the explanation of how we got here now is clear, and all of these items appear to me to be essential for essential or prudent for the operation of the police and fire departments going forward. And so with that explanation, I'm satisfied, and I thank you for providing that, and I'm ready to vote in favor. I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but, you know, John, go ahead.
Oh, no, the only question I had, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we had hit a lot more boulders out in West Brat and
That was my question.
come into a lot of different problems, and we ate up some of that, a lot of that contingency, we wouldn't
How
have,
are you
we
gonna buy
wouldn't,
the
we
washers?
wouldn't be having this discussion right now. So the
I agree with
contingent, right?
Yes.
So the contingency is there. I mean, you have to build that in.
Right.
You know, so we lucked out.
May I just say something?
We lucked out so far.
So
We have, and we anticipate remaining in good favor.
Yeah.
But just to the process, I really want to make sure that I explain the process to maybe Dick, but maybe others as well. Before the bond vote, we talked about a West Brattleboro station, a central station, and a police station. We didn't even know where the police station was going to go. And somebody said to me, you collectively said to me, how much will that cost? And I said, let me go home and think about that. So I went home and thought about that and built the bond budget based on concept. Now you're telling me that I should have known that the radio tower would have failed in the last 2 years. And that it's impossible for me as an individual to be omniscient. And I'm not trying to be facetious, it's just the assignment was create a budget of with concept only for 3 different locations, for 3 different types of stations, and then we'll make it work if it passes. And that's exactly what we've done. And we're here to tell you that we have about, so far, even after this expenditure that we're asking you for tonight, we have $600,000 in the bank that we want to come back to you again and say, guess what? Our planning was really good. Our thought process has been very diligent. Every nickel we can find in the construction documents and or overlaps and so forth, we have saved and put aside for the benefit of the town of Brattleboro. And that's why we're here tonight, to ask you permission to use those funds for these reasons. And it wasn't the moving ball or anything like that. So I just want to make sure you understand that. Because my honor and integrity is so important to me that I would never want you to think that of me or anyone else that's worked on the project. So, thank you.
Is the plan to spend down the contingency, or is that our plan to look and?
Not every penny of it.
Okay.
The plan is to take
the
each of
best bang for
these
our buck.
in
Yeah, well.
their appropriate bite-sized pieces. So I can't guarantee that we wouldn't be sitting here a year from now looking at a final expense from contingency that might indeed take it to 0. But the only way we would get there is through the individual decisions we make along the way on nights like tonight,
Right.
where you authorize additional uses. So I can guarantee that we're going to have a couple $100,000 worth of generator expenses that we're going to bring to you
Yep.
at a future date. I can guarantee that we're going to have tens of thousands of dollars worth of administrative office equipment that we're going to bring to you, furnishings for the
Central.
fire department headquarters at Central. There will be some other expenses of this type as well for all 3 of the locations. Exactly what those will be, I don't know. And I don't have a specific number in mind, except to be as self-disciplined and responsible as possible at each individual moment that we bring you a set of expenditures. I think we've done that with this one, and we're preserving almost $800,000 worth of the contingency for the future uses, which is why we recommend approval.
Just, John actually asked my question, what if we had hit a rock? But I think this is kind of a pain in the neck process to have to answer all this and wonder why things are this way, but I also think it's incredibly beneficial. I mean, despite Dick's comment last week about us all being senior citizens, I hope to oversee several more projects like this. Knowing how it works and that there are things you can save money on by not putting them into the guarantee, I had no idea about that. And when somebody asked me, how can they possibly not know they needed a washing machine? I know what to tell them. So again, just part of the process.
I'm sorry, David, I didn't hear you.
You want my hearing?
No, I move to authorize the expenditure of $65,239.80 from the overall police fire facilities project contingency for the purposes that are itemized and individually described in the memorandum dated January 12, 2017 from Town Manager Elwell.
We have a motion to approve 65,000 and change worth of expenses for various items for the police fire facilities project. Is there any further discussion from anybody on the board or anybody who's in attendance? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? We have 1 opposed. That carries 4-1. Is there any other business to talk about relating to the police fire facilities project? Then we're on to new business. The first item under new business is the financial report. Mr. O'Connor.
My favorite time.
Thank you, David. Good evening, everyone. So you have in your packet the December financial report We're halfway through the fiscal year at this point, and the general fund expenditures are at 53.5% of the budget, but that includes several annual payments that if we prorate those payments, the expenditures are down to 47.8. The utilities fund, the expenditures were 50.9%, and the parking fund was at 46.5%. And again, we have a couple of expenditures in the utilities fund that are one-time expenditures, and if we prorate those, the utility fund expenses would be at 46.4%. Solid waste disposal fund revenues were at 42.6, and their expenditures were at 40.9%. The loan report shows that we have $3,863,600 in outstanding loans. 2 of the loans had payments that were overdue, and 1 loan is in default and fully reserved. Program income. That report shows that we have $656,612 available for additional grants and loans. And I know we have a loan coming up with Chris tonight, so $656,612 is available.
Do you need it?
And finally, the grant report shows that we have 44 active grants and 8 grants in the application process. And there's some detail on each of those grants in the grant report. So that's the financial report for December. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer those questions.
Anybody on the board have any inquiry or comments about the current financial report? Anybody in attendance have any questions about the financial report? Well, thank you, John. So then the next agenda item is a financial audit and a single audit. You'll be speaking to us about that as well?
I can do that.
Yes, please.
Okay. So again, included in your packet is the financial audit, the audited financial statements for the town. It's a document of 54 pages with all the financial information you could ever possibly want to know about the town. What I'll say about the financial audit is that this was a, what do they call it, an unmodified opinion. Used to be called a non-qualified opinion. Now it's a non-modified opinion, or an unmodified opinion. And that's a good thing. That means they didn't have to adjust the opinion for deficiencies in our reporting. And basically it says that everything that's included in this financial report after their audit is fair and accurate and represents the financial condition of the town accurately as of June 30, 2016. And I'm not going to go through a lot of this report with you, but I will point out a couple of things for you so you can just, if you turn to page 13 of the financial audit. And there, this is from the balance sheet, and you can see the fund equity piece. And looking at the first column, the general fund, you can see that we closed the year with $3,857,643 in fund balance. And of that, $2,792,759 was unassigned. So that's a very substantial fund balance, the unassigned fund balance. $494,500 was committed, commitments for various capital projects. And actually there was still a balance outstanding, $45,000 for Tropical Storm Irene. And we're still waiting to get some of these projects closed with the state. So we haven't gone back to town meeting to return those funds to the unassigned fund balance. And also included in that committed balance was $134,225 to reduce the property tax levy this fiscal year. And then finally, the non-spendable is $570,384, and those are things like prepayments primarily that really, you can't spend it, it's already been spent. Then on page 20, I think it's 20. Yeah, page 20. The bottom line, you can see that we had a budget which was using fund balance of $96,265. That's what that negative number there means, that's a use of fund balance. You can see we closed the year with an actual surplus of $870,787. So the difference between the two is the $967,052. So we had a very substantial swing between what we expected to do in the general fund last year and what actually happened. And if you go up the list of the variances, the last column, you can see where some of these large variances are. Public Works, 84,000. Police Department, 171,000. Fire Department, 93,000. And if you go flip to the first page 19, you can see employee benefits, 253,000. Risk management, 92,000. And then going all the way up to the top, you can see that taxes actually came in $146,000 better than budget. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things in the financial audit for you, and just to. But there's, like I said, there's 54 pages. So if you have any other questions, just let me know.
John, you're going to be proud of me.
Okay.
I didn't read all of it, but I read a lot of it.
All right.
And what really struck me is on page 7. In fiscal year 2017, 56% of property taxes billed by the town of Brattleboro will be used to fund public education.
Correct.
John, highlighted in my.
You highlighted it too. That, I want people out there to remember that. That's huge.
It's more than half.
It's huge.
Yep.
Yeah. So you can yell at us all you want,
Okay.
but we're under the 50% mark.
All
So
right. Yep. Well, good.
Anybody else on board?
I do have a question. Even though everything everyone knows in here, there's one thing in here that they didn't explain. And it's on the first page, down under auditor's responsibility, the second paragraph, right in the middle. That this report is not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the entity's internal controls. We're the entity, and they don't say anything about our internal control. How does a policymaker find out how good our internal controls are?
You would find out if deficiencies were noted by the auditors. And you'd see that in the single audit, for example, which deals with federal awards. And if they had found weaknesses in internal controls, they would document those.
That's what we show. Because the same disclaimer was in the single audit, or in the earlier audit too. So, because I thought, oh, well, that's where it is, but it wasn't.
Right.
So it's basically the methods that they use reveal whether our systems are working.
Yeah, they don't express an opinion on it, but they do
Right.
test
That
it.
they would say something that's not, right.
They would say something if there were deficiencies.
Great, thank you.
Any questions from anybody on the board? Dick?
When you were going through that dissertation, John, you know, the reality is our revenues, I mean, we were up $140,000 in taxes, which really isn't a lot of money in terms of growing the grand list. And then that other revenue bump was a significant overage in the 1% money, which brought you, you know, a little over $200,000. So then when you look at the $700,000 that you saved in expenditures, I mean, that is a real, I mean, it's a great thing, but it's a rarity that's gonna happen. So the expectation is, you know, the revenue side really we really need to work on the revenue side because, you know, flukes like what happened last year just don't happen. But as I've said all year long, and I said before when I served here, I think the oversight that's given on a monthly basis has served the town well. I did have a question for you, and I can't find it. But I was looking for, and I think it's somewhere around 5.7, 5.8 million of surplus revenue for the utility fund.
What that is, that utilities fund is a little different. What that number is the difference between the assets and the liabilities. Okay, it's not all cash. It's just the difference. It's like equity, if you would, in a business.
But even though it's not all cash, there is a substantial cash balance in that fund as well. And one of the items that the board agreed to earlier in the year as something that you wanted to come back and revisit was that ordinance that uses the model for the utility fund to establish the rates. And staff has recently met around that topic to prepare to come and follow up on that with you. So I'm hoping that at one of the 2 February meetings, we'll probably be prepared to address that item.
Other questions from the board about the budget? I wanted to follow up about the other post-employment benefits issue. 6 years ago when I joined the board, there had been a new general accounting standards concern expressed and need to at least cite out the potential liability for other post-employment benefits. And in those first couple of years after the focus on those other post-employment benefits, we actually were asked by a board member and by others to begin putting some money aside in order to reserve against that potential liability. But there hasn't been that type of an approach to those to that accounting issue in the last 3, 4, 5 years. And what I came to understand is that in actuality, we as a business pay on a going rate annually for the post-employment benefits that we're responsible for. And so while we're required to note that potential liability in the statements, it's just part of our annual budgeting process, always has been, and will be going forward. But if you could please, or you or Peter could address that briefly, because it was such an issue 5 years ago, and it's really sort of faded away, but it is referenced again as a potential liability in these statements.
It is in the statements, yes, and let me tell you what that liability is.
About 2.7, as I recall, almost $3 million.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it broken out here as a separate line item. Let's see if it's somewhere else.
Well, if you could speak to it, just how it works, and then I'll keep looking.
Yeah. Well, what it is, it's an accounting adjustment based on the benefits earned over the employee's lifetime. And so what they're saying is the employee during his working life has accrued this benefit, and we need to recognize what that liability is. And so that's what it is. And we recognize the liability in the government-wide statements, but we don't really fund that liability at all. As you said, David, we pay for that on a cash basis each year. But that's the difference. That's what the adjustment is, and that's why it shows up on the government-wide statements, but not in the budget or anywhere else.
If we had sufficient resources to actually fund it, then we would draw from it to pay those benefits on an annual basis. Instead, we fund the annual cost on an ongoing budgetary basis because that's a rate of expenditure we can afford.
So I found it on page 9,
Okay.
and it's toward the bottom of the page, 2,797,923.
Now, I remember in the first couple of years after we needed to make that disclosure, we actually put some money up.
We did $30,000.
Wow.
Is that still
article.
is that still sitting somewhere?
Yep.
Excellent.
So we got that to fall back on.
All right, but we're paying for it annually as part of our regular budget.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the board have any questions?
Must be a
Anybody in
petty
attendance
cash.
have any questions?
Should I go on to the single audit?
Yes, please.
All right. So the single audit, it's 9-page documents. This is quite a bit briefer. And the real page that tells it all is on page 9 of that single audit. It's the last page of the single audit. And you can see the auditors here have gone down, and first of all, they look at the financial statements, and you can see they've issued an unmodified opinion. Did they find any material weaknesses? No. Did they find any significant deficiencies? No. Then they go down to the next section, which is federal awards. And they do the same thing. Did they find any material weaknesses in the way we accounted for our federal awards? No. And were there any deficiencies? None reported. And so going down a little further, they identify a couple of the major programs that we had, and the dollar threshold between those major programs and the other awards. And finally, they close with the auditee is qualified as a low-risk auditee, yes. And there were no audit findings identified for the year ended June 30, 2016. And there were no audit findings identified for the year ended June 30, 2016. So financial statements, no findings. Federal awards, no findings. And at the very bottom of the page, there were no unresolved prior audit findings either. So that really is the crux of this single audit. And so I think we came away really well.
John, I gotta say kudos to your department.
Thank you, John.
Every
This is
year,
like your third
Yeah.
all straight A's report.
well,
That's
it's
what we strive
nice.
for, Dave.
You know, it's nice. You know, especially an independent agency coming in and really going through everything.
Yep.
And it's nice. It's a
Yeah.
nice report.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the single audit? Well, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Excellent work.
We've come a long way, right, Dick?
Yes, we have.
Yes, we have.
The next item on tonight's agenda, if we're finished with our financial reports, is the partial release of the open space easement and restrictions for Commonwealth Dairy. Okay,
Good evening.
if you'd introduce yourselves and tell us about this matter, please.
I'm Rod Francis. I'm the Planning Director, and I'm here to help with any background questions on the matter before you. And this is Craig Miskovich.
I'm an attorney with Downs, Rockland, Martin, and I represent Commonwealth Dairy.
So let me commence. Some of you may know that the original Delta Campus PUD came with a very large parcel that was reserved for as a conservation area. And one of the functions of this conservation area was to act as a buffer between the planned unit development of Delta Campus and a neighboring residential neighborhood that was zoned rural residential. In the progress of building out the Delta Campus, a sequence of decisions got made, including selling a parcel of land to Commonwealth Dairy, and they established a factory there some years ago, and they've been doing very well, and their success involves the expansion of production at that site, and now they're contemplating increasing production again and needing more space. In the interim, from a planning standpoint, through the town plan process and then through the land use regulations that we adopted in December 2015, we changed entirely the process by which you'd go about obtaining a planned unit development, and required that the underlying zoning of a district would apply in certain key regards to the definition of a planned unit development. And so whereas before, under the old zoning ordinance, the Delta Campus was its own zoning district and didn't relate directly to an underlying zoning district, in future amendments to the Delta Campus will actually have to relate to the underlying zoning, which is industrial. Moreover, we expanded the area of industrial to take in the two properties to the south of the Commonwealth Dairy site that were once rural residential and they're now zoned as industrial, in recognition of the fact that industrial activity at Delta campus was actually taking place. And that given the traffic volumes and the activity at Delta campus, it was more orderly and consistent, which is a requirement of our land use regulations, to zone those parcels as industrial. We fast forward to now, Commonwealth Dairy is in the process, has purchased land to the south of their existing factory site, and there's this small area of land sandwiched between the two parcels to the south and their existing factory site. This small piece of land, this sliver of land, acted as a buffer between the old PUD and what was rural residential. But between the zoning changes and the changes in the PUD process, we now no longer need a buffer in that location. So it's a small excising of a very large parcel that's devoted to conservation. There are no natural features or wildlife attributes that are associated with this sliver of land that would make it problematic to develop basically as a bridge between the existing Commonwealth site and the parcels that Commonwealth Dairy purchased to the south. So that's the background. I'm sure Craig can explain to you if you need any answers on the form and the content of the language of the open space restriction.
Anything that you want to present?
Not a thing.
Anybody on the board have any questions about this application?
I don't have a question about the application, but could I ask just a kind of a follow-up question after this?
Ask whatever you like, now or later.
Okay, well, my concern is not about this sliver of land at all. I mean, there's no ancient frogs or burial ground in there, so
Don't even say it.
So, but my concern is what happens, and God, I hope it happens, that Commonwealth Yogurt wants to expand again. Can they anywhere on this plan develop any more with the regulations that we have right now?
Yeah, sure.
The Commonwealth Dairy expansion plans on its current land, what's known as Unit 2/3, is
Yep.
constrained, but not constrained because of town zoning ordinance. We're not close to any coverage ratio
Right.
that would apply in the industrial zoning district. We're constrained because of really federal law, wetlands and stream buffers. That the expansion that will occur soon, the hopefully soon expansion will be likely over the sliver of land, but not much. That is also likewise constrained with some wetland issues, but mostly down into what's known as the Holby property,
Right.
which is acquired by Commonwealth.
Yep.
So the expansion, parking and commercial office expansion will occur on that lot.
Closer to the road,
To the south,
To the
closer,
south and a little to the east.
to
yeah.
Route 5.
yeah, closer to Route 5, yeah.
Certainly closer to Route 5, yes. And Guildford.
So basically, at that point, there's not much further that they could expand without going through federal regulations? Or-
Well, moving, and I'm the lawyer, not the engineer.
I
so
know.
Take this with a grain of salt. But moving the office functions out of their existing plant
Yep.
and moving the parking further to the south onto the Holby
Right,
property
right.
will allow the plant to
To
be
expand.
expanded to the,
Right.
what would that be, to
Good.
the east.
Yep.
And add additional manufacturing capacity
Yep.
in this by expanding the footprint of the plant.
I hope they grow as much as they can.
I want the pudding to be made here in Brattleboro.
Greg,
I'm not sure it's within your authority. I'm not sure it's within your authority to condition approval on such, but I will take
Come on,
note.
you're the lawyer for crying out loud, Greg. Let's get that in there.
Any other questions or comments? Peter?
I'd like to note for the record that Town Attorney Bob Fisher worked with Craig and the Commonwealth team to make sure that the document that's before you tonight protected the town's interests adequately, and we recommend approval.
Ready for motion, please?
To authorize the town manager to sign a partial release of the grant of restriction and open space easement and restrictions dated March 19th, 2007 for the purpose of allowing the Commonwealth Dairy expansion project.
We have a
And-
motion to authorize town manager to sign the partial release for the Commonwealth expansion. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? It carries 5-0. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
You don't want to do a friendly amendment?
Next item on tonight's agenda is the request for a small business assistance program loan for Hermit Thrush Brewery. And Mr. Gagnon? Mr. Gagne is here to speak for Hermit Thrush Brewery.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
You want to take some publicity time?
I would love to.
You're on TV even though it doesn't show up there.
Relative to the sour,
Yeah, people seem to like our sour beers, so we're gonna try to make a little more of them. We're looking at expanding wholesale production predominantly, though certainly that'll drive a bit of retail increase, I expect. Keeping brewing activities going on at High Street downtown, and tasting room going on there too. Downtown's been good to us, so we're sticking around, of course. We tried to expand production within Brattleboro, but ended up needing to go just across the border into Dummerston for the facility addition. But we are needing to do some renovations downtown to make the overall project happen. And so we're asking for your approval of this town loan in the amount of $70,000 at a 3.25% interest rate. Excited to be keeping the green business going and not burning fossil fuels in our production of beer. And Vermont flavors need to come to Greater New England.
Peter, if you could talk through the process for the consideration, vetting, and the approval of the Small Business Assistance Program loan?
Sure. $70,000 is the maximum available for any one loan under the program. All loans of whatever magnitude are considered first by a committee that reviews the applications against a set of criteria that are set forth in the policy that's been approved by the Select Board.
It consists of me, Dave Scholes, Kim Ellison,
yeah.
Rod Francis, and John O'Connor.
And others from the community as well.
David Boyle.
David Boyle.
Right.
Adam Grinnell.
Thank you.
And Grinnell. It's a nice committee.
And that committee unanimously recommends approval of this $70,000 loan for a period of 5 years at 3.25% interest rate for reasons that were described by Mr. Gagne and are set forth, in terms of the purposes of it being found to be beneficial and in accordance with the program, and then also because Hermit Thrush has agreed to the conditions that are identified in the memorandum from Kim Ellison, dated January 6th, that identifies the protections for the town and the program income fund in the making of the loan.
Thank you. Anybody on the board have any questions or comments? Dick?
Actually had a couple of calls on this, so don't take this personal. A couple of people did call me. One of the questions that I had before I ask you what they asked me to ask you was, I saw that you extended your lease for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And is the landlord contributing anything to the new fit-up cost here?
Some. He is graciously taking care of a lot of demolition. There's an archaic AC unit that was no small task to take out. The deck in the rear as well as the roof are going to be removed as well. And there will be some paving costs and fire sprinkler update costs that he'll be taking care of. So
Okay,
we appreciate that very much as well.
thank you. The question that I was asked, because you're moving over into Dummerston, not because you want to. but
Adding the
be-
facility, I'd
that
say.
facility. People were concerned that money was going to be filtered over to that project, and I said, no, the guidelines, to my understanding, with the committee, I actually used to serve on the committee, that wasn't going to happen.
That's correct.
And so I want to make sure that we're clear that, because as this might be a simultaneous project going on, that these funds here are specific for High Street.
And I can speak to that a little bit, saying the construction budgets for High Street, the latest number is around 82,000. Including the accessible bathroom addition in the front, the loading dock facilities in the rear, and some plumbing outfits that are due. The whole town loan would be used downtown.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's important to make sure that,
That's clear.
you know, when people say, hey, they're using money for taking it out of town, that we make sure we clarify that.
And the itemized construction budget was submitted as part of the application process.
What I saw in here. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from anybody on board? Anybody in attendance have any questions or comments?
Oh, I just want to point out one thing, sort of to Dick's point, just in case somebody out there, it is, the Brattleboro name is remaining
On the
on the
can.
can, so,
It's in our logo. We're tight here.
yeah.
Don't change what works.
We're ready for motion, please.
Move we approve a small business assistance program loan for Hermit Thrush Brewery LLC in the amount of $70,000 for 5 years at 3.25% interest in support of renovations and leasehold improvements for Hermit Thrush Brewery in Brattleboro.
We have a motion to approve $70,000 loan for Hermit Thrush Brewery in Brattleboro. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Congratulations.
Thank
Good
you
luck.
very much. Appreciate the support.
Oh, yeah. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
The next item on tonight's agenda relates to the Tri-Park Housing Cooperative, and I see our planning director again.
You do. Hello.
Greetings again.
Thank you.
Please, would you talk with us about this application?
Sure. So many years ago, an agreement was struck between Tri-Park Housing Cooperative and the town of Brattleboro, such that at Tri-Park Housing Cooperative's request, my office, whoever was in it, would start pursuing grant funds to undertake a master plan that would address directly the relocation or removal of homes that were identified in the agreement, either occupying the floodway or the floodplain. And that was most recently reaffirmed in 2011 at the completion of the water and sewer project in Tri-Park. So in September of 2016, the Tri-Park board voted and affirmed that they would want to pursue a master plan, and then advised the town that we should start looking for funding. Since December, we've been working through a potential list of sources for funding, and there's a calendar, as you know, for Vermont Community Development Program grants, and we are submitting this application now so that the April meeting of the Vermont Community Development Program will have this application to consider. The budget as outlined here totals $80,000 for the master plan process. There are some features that are significant here, including provision for an owner's representative that would represent the interests of Tri-Park Cooperative in the master plan process. And that shows a line item total of $10,000. We are reasonably confident that this $30,000 application to VCDP will be well received, and we know that there's already a commitment from Vermont Housing and Conservation Board of $10,000 at least to cover the owner's representative component of the master plan project. So we are still pursuing smaller private contributions, but the urgency of the matter and the length of time it's going to take, we want to make a commitment at this point to proceed with the project as early as possible, which we would expect to start happening in the late June, early July timeframe and be completed by the end of the year of 2017.
Anybody on the board have any questions or comments?
This is not really related to the grant, it's just a curiosity. Are there additional sites that could be used on that property higher up, or where some of these homes could be relocated to, or do they really need to go to another parcel?
There has been some preliminary investigation previously of the potential for other sites. Many people may not be aware that, in fact, it's a different mobile home park at the top of the hill. That's Deepwood.
Right.
So there's a boundary line between the two properties. And so some of the sites at Deepwood were developed using a large amount of fill to make them viable as house sites. With some reorganization of the space, there's perhaps potential inside Mountain Home Park for a small number of sites, but
Not much.
it would be, at this point, it would seem unlikely that it was going to accommodate the full 42 that are identified as needing to be relocated or removed. And then one of the purposes of the master plan is to actually review the viability of acquiring extra land. And so theoretically, it would no longer be tri-park, it would be
Quad park.
quad park or something like that. Pentapark. And one of the things that the housing cooperative would need to decide is what the ongoing operational costs associated with another site would be, because they would stretch their staffing and their equipment. And so there's a sort of a financial calculation that they need to make about that.
Anybody else on the board? Well, I'll just note that Tri-Park community was hit hard as part of the flooding in Tropical Storm Irene. And we as the town and select board want to be as supportive as possible in making sure that accommodations are made and that we're working together to ensure the health of those housing communities. They serve a vital function in the town for housing for many of our residents, and I think it's a really good use of these program income funds to make that commitment to the long-term health and viability of Tri-Park. So I want to thank you for working on the project, and I'm totally in favor of approval of this authorization.
Thank you very much.
Rod, is that the largest or one of the largest parks in the state of Vermont?
I understand that it's the largest. Mountain
Yeah.
Home Park is the largest.
Which is, that's kudos to Brattleboro for that. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
Any further discussion? I move to authorize submission of the Vermont Community Development Program Planning Grant application in the amount of $30,000. It was $40,000.
It's 40 for the town's.
$30,000 to support the Tri-Park Master Plan project. And I move to authorize use of up to $40,000 in Town of Brattleboro program income funds to support the Tri-Park Master Plan project, contingent on receiving support from the Vermont Community Development Program and other sources. We have motions to approve submission of the VCDP planning grant and to authorize program income funds to work towards the master plan for Tri-Park. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Thanks, Rod.
You're welcome. Good night.
All right. Next item on tonight's agenda is to close out the VCDP implementation grant for the Harmony lot and Green Street retaining wall. Do we need to have a public hearing?
Yes, please.
I open the public hearing. Patrick, are you going to talk with us about that, or Peter? Patrick, tell us about the Harmony lot and Green Street grant and how it was applied. Please.
Absolutely. So in the ordinary course of managing any VCDP-funded projects, there are two times when a public hearing is required. The first being at the time of application, and the second being now at the closeout stage. As many of you will recall, the town applied for $300,000 in funding to support a project with an estimated total cost of $585,000 for the Green Street Wall project. That grant was funded. Thankfully, the project was successfully managed quite a bit under budget. And so the town did not fully realize $300,000. It came out to $255,000, and that's because the project overall project expenses was $490,000 and not the $585,000. The savings is largely a result of the flexibility the town offered in terms of scheduling the project. We bid it once, came in kind of high. We rebid it a second time and provided a real great deal of flexibility for the contractors to be able to determine when they wanted to do the project. We believe this is why we had very favorable pricing, and this is why we're able to complete the project well under budget.
Anybody from the board have any questions or comments? Well, there was a question at one point in this process when the wall failed about whether we should just close down that road.
Oh,
And I'm sure glad that we didn't go that route.
no, absolutely.
It's a really nice looking
So I wish
wall.
we had.
It is a nice looking wall.
It's
It
a
looks
nice
really
looking
good.
wall.
Oh, it came out great.
Any other comments or questions from anybody on the board or anybody who's in attendance for the purposes of this public hearing? So we'll look forward to minutes of the public hearing being transmitted to whoever they need to go to and to close out of this grant. Close the public hearing. Any further business relating to the implementation grant relating to Harmony Green Street retaining wall? Next item on the agenda is the IT improvement plan. Peter.
Thank you. So, as you well know, we set out over a year ago on this project, knowing that our IT systems were deficient in the town, knowing that in some cases they were not designed properly, in other cases they had simply become obsolete from age and failing to keep up with improvements in technology, but not having a really good grip on the details of in what ways we were deficient and what needed to be done in order to address that. So we knew we needed expert assistance. I formed a committee of staff representing all the different departments in the town. Then we went through a competitive process to select a consultant. CCI Managed Services is who has performed this work for the town. And over a period of months in their initial investigation, they did begin to make findings of what would need to be done in the big picture to improve our IT operations, but alerted us to the fact that we actually were really vulnerable at the time. We had inadequate firewalls and other aspects of our security in our IT systems that left the town extremely vulnerable, and so we had some work that we needed to address before we could finish this plan and come out and have a public conversation around this like tonight, just in order to protect ourselves so that when we started to describe particular deficiencies, we didn't issue an open invitation to hackers to come in and do harm to the town. We accomplished that. Unfortunately, as we were accomplishing that last summer, you will undoubtedly recall that on August 22nd, we were hacked.
We were hacked.
At the Central Fire Station. And so even though at that point we were more than halfway through implementing the security improvements that were required, one place we hadn't gotten to yet was the Central Fire Station, and our data there was frozen, and a ransom was requested, and we looked at that situation, determined that we could live without the immediate recovery of that data and live without some of it permanently, and decided not to pay the ransom. So we chalked that up to lessons learned and kept moving forward. We finished the implementation of the urgently needed security protections and moved on to finalize the overall improvement plan. That plan is before you tonight. It's included in the notebooks for this evening's meeting. To hit a couple of highlights from it, there are 7 broad areas of functionality that the consultant recommends be improved, beginning with one that I know you all have experienced a great deal of frustration with, along with the staff, which is the email system. From the day I arrived here in town, I have heard concerns from select board members, and it is a daily impediment to our efficient functioning in terms of how we coordinate with staff, among staff. So the email system needs to be replaced. One of the major problems we face is the complexity of our network design. We actually have 10 separate servers. We want to switch to a system where we will have 2. And the reason why that's important is that basically there's 10 separate systems. We don't have an IT system in the town of Brattleboro right now. What we have is a bunch of disjointed systems that in some ways using certain programs can communicate minimally with each other, but where we are failing to take advantage of what modern technology allows for an organization of our size to be in a system where we're all linked together and can in real time share documents and data and communicate. So the complexity of the network design requires that we slim down and centralize that network structure. We have old servers in most cases, and our data backup and ability to recover when we lose data is significantly inhibited by the fact that we have these old systems, and in some cases the backup systems themselves are unreliable. And so we're at risk of losing data on a daily basis. We believe that some of the communication issues that we suffer from when we do try to transmit data relate to issues in the structured wiring that serves the computers within the buildings. And so there is wiring improvement in network switches that need to be changed out. There's wireless networking that can be improved. Right now, the wireless networking that we rely upon is actually domestic scale. There's one actually in this room. Actually in the next room. It's a small device attached to the wall that looks very much like the modem that you would have at home, or the router that you would have at home, and it's just not sufficient for the demands of a commercial setting like the town's facilities. And so we're looking to install a commercial grade wireless system that will not only improve the wireless functionality in the different facilities, but will also actually, some components of this particular piece will actually improve the wireless communications between facilities. Explicitly, we're looking to create a dedicated link that will have line of sight wireless connection between the Gibson-Aiken Center and this building here, so that we can eliminate line charges and maintain continuous connection. Software licensing is something that has been done on a haphazard basis. That's a real liability for the town. We want to create a centralized and well-maintained system of licensing software. And finally, our PC and notebook replacements. Generally, we've done this as they've failed, and that's a really poor way to replace particularly equipment that we rely upon for not just daily functioning, but also the storage of important information. And so the consultant recommends that we get into a system of scheduled replacement where there's a more thoughtful, planned, regular cycle of replacing equipment. They're recommending 4 years. This particular piece doesn't need funding in the immediate rollout of this, because this will be for an ongoing maintenance of the system, and it's something that we can talk about in future meetings as to what we can afford in an annual budget. But we do believe that committing to a standard cycle and then maintaining that standard cycle is important to maintain the upgraded performance of this once the improvement plan has been implemented. In order to make our overall functioning more centralized through the simplification of our network, we have to change some of how we're connected to the outside world, and actually from facility to facility as well. So there's a table on I believe it's the third page of the memorandum that's before you tonight, dated January 6th from Patrick Moreland via me to you, that speaks to connectivity requirements. And importantly, I'm not going to go line by line through this, but it is important to note that we've done a lot of work to identify what the town doesn't need anymore, not just what the town does need, but where we can reduce line charges or eliminate line charges. And so what you see here is the result of work that Patrick has done with each of the different departments to squeeze as much out of the current costs of the town for monthly line charges and annual line charges, to accommodate the additional charges that we'll have to incur in order to upgrade connectivity in the manner that is recommended by the consultants. And we are right now at about a wash on this, but our work isn't done. We have a series of Earthlink connections that some of which the paper trail on is not that great, and we're not sure exactly what every one of those connections, what purpose every one of those connections serves. But for reasons I hope are obvious and acceptable to you, we don't want to pull the plug on things we don't understand. We want to come to understand them and then decide whether or not we can pull the plug so as not to harm operations or the systems. And so where we are right now is essentially a wash, $160 increase in cost annually to eliminate everything that can be eliminated and add everything that needs to be added in order to make this really dramatic leap forward into 2017 technology. And we do believe once the additional work is done regarding those Earthlink connections, we're actually going to net a savings in connectivity on an annual budget basis. I want to acknowledge the work not only of Patrick, who is the primary contact between town staff and the consultant throughout this work, but also Matthew Wojcik, who's a new employee for us within the last 6 months in the library, came on to perform IT services for the library staff and to provide services, programs, and assistance to the public for the use of the public IT systems at the library. But came to us with a tremendous amount of experience, not just in IT in general, but specifically in IT security and IT systems. And so we've been able to lean on Matthew to assist us in the vetting of this plan and bring it before you with a high level of confidence that it is been slimmed down to its essence, but still is going to provide, again, a really dramatic set of improvements that we believe can be implemented over the next 3 to 6 months. And by the time we get finished with this implementation, instead of struggling on a daily basis just to keep the system functional, we'll actually be fully up to the modern 2017 standards. The best news of all is that like the wash that we forecast in the annual operating expenses for the connectivity, we believe that the plan can be implemented without a request for any additional funding. You'll recall that each year the town has traditionally put in $25,000 into the capital fund for IT equipment replacement. Over these last couple of years, we haven't spent that except on a few items that have simply failed and had to be replaced because we were in this planning process and we knew that there would be substantial expenses coming up. We didn't know exactly what we would be investing in. So the balance that's accrued in that fund is just over $80,000. And the estimated cost to implement the plan is a range of costs. There's some low end and some high end set forth in the document, ranging between $67,000 on the low end and $88,000 on the high end. The fact that the midpoint of that is below the $81,879 available, the fact that we can manage this process as we go along to make sure that we don't overexpend the funds that are available. And in a worst case scenario, the fact that 6 months from now, we'll be beginning a new fiscal year with an additional $25,000 being added into this fund makes us completely confident that if you approve the plan tonight, we can implement it without asking for any additional funding to be authorized. And finally, if you do approve the plan, what we've asked for is that you approve the plan as presented without any specific dollar amount assigned to it, and without any specific allocation of funds to any particular piece of it, because what we'd like to do is take the plan and move forward with it and implement it piece by piece in the logical sequence, working together with CCI to accomplish this work, and bring back to you. We'll do competitive bidding of all of the equipment that's part of this, and we'll bring back to you any element of this that's over $10,000, but otherwise we'll just move as quickly as we can to implement it within my purchasing authority. And finally, while we'd like to continue working with CCI to implement this, and while we think that they may very well, win the bid, so to speak, to continue to provide the support services because they've been very helpful to us just in addressing our needs to date and the security issues and preparing this plan, We do think that it's in the town's best interest to follow through with them during the implementation of this plan that they have created. And then once we get into a steady state maintenance of the upgraded system, we think it would be appropriate to have a new competitive process for the ongoing support services that we'll require. And certainly that might end up being CCI or it might end up being somebody else.
That's a nice competitive, comprehensive
Yeah.
plan. Thank you. John?
Peter, just a quick question.
Sure.
Most of this stuff that's coming in is transferable. I mean, it's it's not hardwired to this building, or it's
The structured wiring section is the one element of it that would indeed be, wires within a building, and that we won't invest until we're further down the road.
Right.
The part of that would relate to structured wiring in this building, we won't.
You see where I'm going.
We won't invest in without at least having further communication with you. So what I would say is, if we can avoid that expense until a decision has been made about this building, we will avoid it. If at some point it looks as though it can be managed and limited and prudently invested while we're still working through the issues around this building, we'll come back and address that with you before proceeding.
But the most of it is computer based.
Almost all of it is devices, and almost all of it relates to things that'll go on outside the four walls of this building.
Kate wants it done last week.
I'm gonna hardwire it.
I was going to ask the same question. You can pick it up and move it.
We won't overinvest here.
Can you pick it up and move it? Yeah.
Sorry, kid.
Any other questions from anybody on the board about the IT plan?
Can I ask a question that has no bearing on this decision in any way?
No, if you're asking something that's not related to the agenda item, that's not what you
can't ask
It is, but it's
So
no
it
bearing
is.
on my way I'm gonna. Are we Comcast users or SovereignNet, or where do we get our internet?
SovereignNet is our primary
Okay.
server. You see in the
It's like
connectivity,
fire-
there
fire
are some other
department, okay.
providers,
Why,
but,
you said-
but
are you
primarily we
selling
rely on
bundles?
SovereignNet.
No, I was just sort of wondering, because I saw Comcast, but then I didn't,
And Patrick can take you on a deeper dive there if you want.
no, I don't.
No, it's
I was curious.
too late for the deeper dive.
I think you nailed it.
Yeah. And we pretty much have an okay, like, if we have no problems with SovereignNet? Like,
Like
we
when
just
you're
fine?
streaming movies
Okay.
during
They're
work.
fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cat videos.
No, I mean, SovereignNet rents space in
Here.
this
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
because they made it a central station in their fiber optic network
Yeah.
that was installed using the American Recovery Act money.
That's exactly right. And some of this connectivity improvement is to take service that we already are satisfied with in terms of the reliability of it and boost the power of it so that the upgraded systems can work properly.
Okay, yeah, that's sort of my question. Is there enough juice or whatever it is to support all this new stuff? But
Right. And that's why the elimination of what's not needed was so important so that we can afford the upgraded
new
systems.
stuff.
Well, you got pretty technical there for a second. Is there enough juice to support?
We have any other questions about the IT plan? We're ready for motion, please.
Move that we approve the information technology we approve the information technology improvement plan as presented.
We have a motion to approve the IT plan as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. So next, we have to consider appointing 3 people to 3 committees. I nominate Ben Copeland to the Agricultural Advisory Board. I nominate Matthew Wright to the Citizen Police Communications Committee. And I nominate Oscar Heller to the Energy Committee. Are there any further nominations? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Next, we are going to be scheduling our March Select Board meetings. This will be by acclamation.
Yay.
First,
Wait a sec.
yeah, what?
The school board is also scheduled to meet at the exact same time in Academy School on March 15th to do the second Wednesday regular meeting, which will be our public information meeting. And I double-checked our report, our work plan to make sure that was accurate, and that's what's on our work plan.
I think they did that last year too, but Hillary Francis checked with Academy School for the informational meeting, sent in the application, and it has been approved pending board approval.
So people have to
And I
decide
think
where to
last
go.
year this happened, there was an overlap
Yeah.
and the board went someplace else and we had the rest of school as we usually do.
We'll see. Just wanted to share that bit of information.
All right, so for right now, we need to move the town meeting day, March 7, regular meeting, because they'll be voting here. And it's been suggested that maybe we could do it at the BCTV studio, if that's okay.
that's fine.
The
Can't?
BCTV studio isn't available for this, and the BCTV would actually prefer that we not rely on that as a
Okay.
alternate site because of how tight it is, and the other uses that they make of it. But our recommendation is that we go to the library community room, which is recently upgraded as part of the renovation over there, and BCTV can broadcast live from that location.
Oh, that's nice, yeah.
So we're gonna do our March 7 meeting at the community meeting room at the library. And then we're gonna schedule our informational meeting now for Wednesday, March 15th, but we're gonna ask Jan to check with Hillary and the school board, school district personnel, because we can still move that if we need to. And then we're gonna have our organizational meeting for new select board on Monday, March 27 at 5:30 PM. And our informational meeting will be doors open at 6, caucuses at 6:30, and meeting at 7 on March 15th. Anybody have any concerns about that besides what Mr. Scholes noted about potential conflict with the school board? Hear, hear. Then those meetings will be set in unless we hear something different about the informational meeting. Is there any further business to come in front of the meeting? Hearing none, we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. I want to thank BCTV operators and everybody who's been watching, whether live or recorded. I want to thank everybody who's been in attendance. I want to thank members of the press, including the one who's already gone. I want to thank our ASL interpreters. Good night.